Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in this video we're going to be looking at some Operation Summer vehicles which I would personally like to see coming to War Thunder for an Operation Summer style event. On top of this, I would just like to let you know that on Humble Bundle right now you can actually pick up the Beginner's Pack for War Thunder. This is the same one that you see on the console stores and also the same one that you see I believe on Steam as well. But it is just available on Humble Bundle, and generally if you subscribe to Humble Bundle monthly, you normally get a little bit of a discount for this Beginner's Pack. On top of this, we do have an affiliate link for the Humble Bundle. We use all of the all of the stuff we get from the affiliates program to give back to you guys. Right now on the Tech Hub, we have 8 giveaways going for Men of War games. So Men of War Assault Squad 2, Condemned Heroes, all of that stuff. So check that out in the Discord, link in the description, and at the same time, there will be a pinned comment with this link if you want to pick up this pack for yourself. Remember that this is unfortunately only for PC users at this moment. On console, I also believe you have access to this pack just through the relevant stores. So, let's get started with some of these vehicles as we mean to go on. Before we get into this, there is something to talk about. So, as you can see here, the special vehicles so far from the 2019, I've included here the Festive event, the Sea Voyage, the Battlefield Engineer event. So USA, you got 3, the Macabre Mariner and T-30, Germany 4, the Focke-Wulf 90C, the H-75A, that was from World War Mode, VFW, and then the JU-388J. The USSR have 4, the 122 BIS, I-180S, Su-85A, and the Leningrad. The Britain only has 1 in the form of the Tiger. The French have 2, the Sir Blondet, and also the MB-152. So because of this, since Italy and Japan have 0, it would be nice to see an Italian or Japanese vehicle included somewhere in this Operation Summer stuff, which hopefully is coming up. Now, if that doesn't happen, then obviously, hopefully we get something around Christmas or something like that for them. But since we've just had the release of the Japanese naval tree, it makes complete sense, at least to me, to put something for them in it, whether it be a destroyer or a mid-tier vehicle. I think it would be a nice little touch. But anyway, let's talk about the asset viewer as well. So there are some stuff in the files that we may see in the Operation Summer event. Of course, we have the H-34, American style. This could be the first gift helicopter that the Americans get. The main difference between this and the one that the French have, the first reserve vehicle, is the different armaments that are involved. One of them, of course, being this big dual 20mm shape on the size, let's call it, and also some other differences. There are also a bunch of H-75s sat in the files, which could be added, and a few AMXs as well, or I believe maybe only one AMX. So there are in the files. I've done videos on them before, therefore I'm not going to discuss them in this video. There are also some other vehicles that I would like to see, such as like the S.U.M.M.E.R Tiger, but understand, once again, I've already talked about it. There's even a video of me going through a user mission on the S.U.M.M.E.R Tiger, therefore I'm just going to leave it out of this list since I brought it up before. So if you want to see any of those user missions or models, make sure to go to that playlist on the channel. Have a look for yourself. The first vehicle that I'm going to bring up, which is obviously French, is the Panhard Ebr. Now, I've picked the 75 FL11 version. There are a basic 3 variants, or 3 main variants of the Ebr. You've got the one with the FL11 turret, which is the same turret on the AMX-13, which we see in game. Then we have a normal 75mm turret on the Panhard with a slightly longer 75, which you also find on the AMX-13, the one that just got up-BR'd to 6.3, and then there's a version which has a 90 on it. So therefore, you can see that there are a lot of options. Now, I've picked the one which I think would cause the least amount of ruckus, just because I want to see how the wheeled system would work in a game like War Thunder, whether you're allowed to move the central wheels or if you just stuck with a 4-man idea on the wheels. For me, I think this is really cool. I like the Panhard. Since we've had an explosion of armored cars in the game over the last year or so, why not add this, and with the scouting mechanic and all of that? It has powering it a 12-cylinder gasoline engine with 200 horsepower, which gives it around 15.4 horsepower per ton. It has access to 3 7.5mm secondary machine guns, and of course the engine itself is a 2-cylinder, and it was mounted in an interesting area. So you can see here on this cross section of the EBR, it technically has 2 drivers, one going behind and one going forward. One of them is the radio operator, obviously the person at the back, but the idea is no matter if you go forward or backwards, the Panhard would be as quick as it would, either way. So it has a system where the engine mounted in the center, where you could just go quickly, either way, and also the center of mass being very much in the center with the turret, the engine, and everything else there. It's a 4-man crew, as you can see, and the other thing to point out as well is one of the issues that the Panhard had, at least in this configuration, was in order to fix the engine or, be able to do anything with it, you had to take the turret off to be able to get to it. So obviously on-field repairs, not exactly the easiest thing to do. The next vehicle is a simple one, the M60a3 Now, what is this? Well, imagine if you took the M60a1 that we have in game, you upgraded its chassis a little bit, and then you fitted a T29 turret to it. That's pretty much what this machine is. It's a T1E1, which is an up-armored version of the M60a1 we have in game, and the new turret which has the T5E1 105mm. It was used for just testing the gun on the T29. The project itself was cancelled on the 22nd of August 44. I think they made about 20 of these things. So in game, you are basically marrying the ideas of the T29 and the M60a1. For me personally, that sounds fantastical. The only problem is, of course, we got the T30 not too long ago. So seeing this so soon as another heavy into the American premium area would be probably not the best, let's just say. But overall, it's a cool design. I'm sure eventually it'll come to game. We'll just see when it actually does. The next vehicle on the chopping block is, well, not chopping block, the chopping good, or whatever, is the T95E8. Now, we have the T95E1 in game. There is also many shouts, such as the T95E2, 3, 4 to 8. So there are a bunch of different T95s you can add. The reason why I picked this one, the E8, is that it has the 120mm delta. Now, this machine was actually a stabilized 120mm on the T95 platform, and the 120 was kind of the precursor to the Leopard and the Abrams 120 that we see today. So it's an incredibly powerful gun mounted on a pretty cool chassis, which unfortunately never really went to the places where you wish it would have, especially after the successful prototypes that they created. And they also made, as I said, a bunch of different T95 variants. Some had hydropneumatic suspension, which was pretty cool, and then others mounted stuff like the 152mm, so they were able to fire shillelaghs. But I just picked this one because I think it would fit great in the game with the 120mm stabilized, whereas the T95 that we have in game isn't stabilized, so it's a little bit rocky sometimes. Stabilization is always nice. The next one is a Swedish vehicle, or a British-Swedish vehicle. This is the Stridsvagn 104. It has access to the Remo package and has also the Continental diesel engine, which is coupled with an Allison automatic gearbox. So pretty much what you do is you take a Centurion, you beef up its engine, you also beef up the armor on it with 120mm of an upper glacis, and obviously sloped with some smoke barrels that you can see on either side, 6 on either way. So with the Remo package, with the actual, the armor on all over it, you can see the suspension is hurting a little bit, but overall this would be quite a powerful tank. And we also have the Shock Cowl delay, which would be very similar to this. Maybe the Shock Cowl would be slightly better, but I still think it would be nice to have another Centurion. Other notable Centurions, the Centurion Mark 7, and also the Centurion Mark 5, the two which we're missing, which could also be cool, either export versions or, standard British versions you stick in. The next one is the Scorpion tank. Now, for me personally, I would actually want to see this in the tech tree, but since there are 2 versions of it, you could stick one as an event vehicle, and then later on in a later patch, you could put in the other one, so therefore we have 2 in the game. So this one is actually the Scorpion 2 that you're looking at. If you actually want to look at the FV101 standard Scorpion, this one would be it, and the difference between them is mainly the gun. So you can see this has access to the Cockerel Mark III MA1 90mm, and it was more designed for the export market. You'll find the 90mm Cockerel on a lot of vehicles. In-game, it is actually on the Orbal 74, I believe it's called, the little light tank by the Italians. But in life, or in history, the Cockerel is used by a multitude of different nations for these light vehicles, because it's seen as a small gun which can deliver a big oomph. So therefore, if you have like lightly armored vehicles, it's good to give them a big boost with this gun. On top of this as well, it has the diesel, 5.9 litre diesel, 190 horsepower on board as well. And also the other one, this is the standard Scorpion, or as known as the Scorpion 1. This had the low velocity 76mm L23A1. It could fire HESH and HE mainly, and also smoke and canister rounds. It could carry around 40 or 42 rounds. These would be great scouts to see for the British. I think around 6.7 BR would work great for these machines. Maybe this one at 6.7, the other one at 7.073. There would be lovely prizes for Operation Summer. Now, we can't go any further after talking about British vehicles. We have to talk about the TOG, right? The TOG 2, which went through many iterations, but the one I want to point out is the one which is sat in Bovington with the 17-pounder. The reason why I'm not going to go into it too much is because I've already done a video on it talking about the vehicle, since there is a model, or a user model made by Beckett in the game. You can check this out in the user missions and models playlist that I made, and in that video I basically go through the history of the TOG, the ideas that it came from, and all of that stuff. So the main reason it came around, TOG standing for the old gang, a bunch of old designers were tasked with the idea of taking some of the past designs and bringing them to the modern day in World War II. This is what they created. As you can tell, not very successful now when you compare it to pretty much every other vehicle in existence at the time. So therefore, it didn't do very well. It wasn't very useful. Therefore, it really never got past the prototype stage. And the next vehicle I want to talk about, which is to me much more interesting, is the 6-wheeled Alavs Saladin. Now, the Saladin is an armoured car which is used by Britain, and also many are exported to other nations, and this would be one which would be designed for export. It has a 90mm attached to it, and also it has around 32mm of armour at the front, so not a lot of armour, 72 kilometers an hour, flying about the place, and you can see probably here is the better picture with the wheels in tow and the 90. There is actually a really nice Pass to the Developers thing by Cade. You can actually go and see it. It talks about all of the different Saladin vehicles, not just the one that I've pointed out. The reason why I want this one to be the premium one, or the gift one, is because it's so bizarre compared to the rest. I would want them in the main tech tree because they are the main production variants, where this one is more of a prototype idea. Let's see if the 90 works. The next one is the M60a3 Slap, which we've talked about at the end of June. The Slap, of course, being leaked in the form that it was. Wasn't obviously a full done model, but incredibly HD. If you don't know what the M60a3 Slap is, basically take an M60a3, add the 120mm Abrams gun to it, add a new firing system, add some new optics, beef up the engine a little bit, and also add some extra armor. As you can see, some extra armor on the upper glacis, lower glacis, and side, and of course the, well, I suppose anti-heat measures around the turret as well. I can't remember exactly what they're called. For some reason, Raid is coming to mind, but I don't think it is Raid. So, yeah, it's another one of these beefed up M60s. It's a lot of power behind it, and obviously the stabilized 120 will always be fun. Really, to me, looks like an 8.7 Premium instead of an Operation Summer vehicle. The next vehicle is the T-44MS. Now, what happens when you're in or part of the Soviet Union and you just have a bunch of very old tanks lying around and you don't have much of a tank force? Well, the first thing you do is try and beef them up, try and make them more modernized. That's why you will get a lot of vehicles like the T-44M or the T-34M or the IS-3M, basically standing for, some variant of modernized. So in this sense, we're looking at a T-44MS. They added a stabilizer, the Cyclone 2-plane system, to the 85mm. They also gave it some upgraded rounds in the form of the Heater FS-3BK2, penning a 250mm at 90, and then of course 300mm a pen with the Heater FS-3BK2M at 90 degrees as well. They also upped the engine, so they gave it a 12-cylinder diesel, 520 horsepower. Overall, it's just a beefy T-44. Now, it hasn't been given any better armor, it's just been given a stabilizer and a beefed up engine, and for me, that sounds really fun. There is also a article here from Private Woke, who he talks about it on the War Thunder forum, so if you search for it online, you can easily find it. The next one is the Type 59D. Now, if we wanted to, you could add in just the Type 59, but I've gone for the Type 59D because it's a little bit different. If you don't know what the Type 59 is, the Type 59 is the licensed built, or Chinese produced, I should say, version of the T-54A. Now, what's different between the T-54A and the T-54s we have in game? The addition of a stabilizer. The 100mm has a stabilizer to it. I'm sure it could fire different rounds as well, but the difference between that and the Type 59D is the Type 59D has a longer 105mm gun. It's called the Type 83A or the Type 94, and the gun has a range of up to 2,000 meters and can fire 80 GMs out of 5,500. It also has a thermal sight. So this would be a slightly better version of the T-54A if that ever came to game, or the Type 59, which is sat on the Chinese tree in the Chinese server. There's a lot of vehicles over there which are really cool, and it would be nice at any point to see them come over to the main clients. We actually have some which have come over. The LVT in the American tree with the ZIS gun on it. Then, of course, we have the Type 62, which has also come over. So there are some which have made their way over in the last few years. Why not have another one? The next vehicle is a little bit modern, let's say. This is from around 2004, 2005. This is the Ramses II Tank. It is an upgraded T-55 by the Egyptians, basically an export T-55 that they've added some modern systems to it. It has the 105mm M60a3. It also has active and passive protection. It also has the TCM AVDS 1790 5A turbocharged diesel, which gives it 908 horsepower. For me personally, the reason why I want to see this is just because we don't have a ton of, let's call them, because you've got to realize that over in history, as exported models became more and more prevalent, you got some weird and wacky and wonderful designs, especially from many Middle Eastern countries and also African countries. So for me, it would be great to see them get shown in the game in some form, and this would be a nice step. We've already seen stuff like the Magak 3, which is, technically the same idea, just from the Israeli point of view, so why not have it from other people's points of view? The next one is the AMX-32. So, the AMX-32, the only real top tier, apart from another AMX-30, and the only real other top tier French tank which we don't really have in the game, which would be kind of useful. The AMX-32, the development of it became the development of it began in the mid-70s, and it still had the same non-stabilized gun as the AMX-30 series of vehicles. It did have a beefed up engine though, the Hispano-Suiza HS110 diesel 720. It did have some extra armor on it, but really nothing to write home about. Kept the coaxial 20mm. This could definitely be seen as an intermediary stage between the AMX-30 and the AMX-40. There are some other 30s that we could get added to the game, especially one which has a stabilized gun. Even though they've made the Super, the premium with the stabilization, there is a standard Tech Tree vehicle out there which we could add, which is an AMX-30 which is stabilized. So why not add this kind of as just an extra thing on top of it, a high-tier non-stabilized gun. Wouldn't be great, but it would be fun. The next one is one of my personal favorites. This is the TR-77-580. Reason why it's called the TR-77-580 is because it was made in 1977 and it has a 580 horsepower engine. Pretty simple. I like the naming. Like it's as simple as it gets. It's a Romanian vehicle, and the original idea for this vehicle came when they decided, just like the T-44M, they wanted to modernize an older tank. So they took a T-55 and they tried to mate it with a Leopard engine. The problem is they couldn't get their hands on a Leopard engine since they were part of the Moscow Pact. So they actually had some engineers go over to Germany to see the engine, see if they could work out a deal and stuff like that in the 70s. The deal fell through, and instead what they tried to do over a number of years is reverse engineer the Leopard engine instead. Now, it kind of worked, it kind of didn't, but in the end, they just went for a different engine because it didn't work too well. So for me, adding the TR-77-580, even though it wouldn't have that crazy beefy engine, it would still be lovely to see because of the history of this vehicle. It's one of the only vehicles which, before the Berlin Wall fell, had both ideas from the West and the East implemented into it as a single vehicle. So yeah, I would just love to see it for that case. It would be a wonderful part of history in War Thunder. The next one is the M1643. This was a prototype vehicle made by the Italians, 16 tons in 1943, and the idea behind it was, of course, from the BT series and the A13 series of vehicles. It had 30mm of sloped armor on the front, it had a 47mm very low in the turret, as you can see, and it had a 275 horsepower gasoline engine. But you've got to remember, that may not be a beefy engine, well, it's only 16 ton. On top of this, 55 kilometers an hour, so it could motor a little bit. Would be lovely to see this in the game. It would be very similar to, in scope, I should say, to a vehicle like the Excelsior, which we already have in game, where it's kind of an improvement on a pre-existing idea. But it wouldn't be too useful in the game, but it still would be nice to see. The next one is one which is way too big. This is the Reggiani 2005 Sagittario. Now, I understand, and I believe this too, I would like this to be the crowning jewel of the Reggiani line of aircraft that we have in the Italian tree. The reason why it's in this list is if it isn't able to make that, be at the top of the RE, the Reggiani line, then we should definitely see it be in a place where we should see it in a place in the game somewhere. So if it can't be on the Reggiani line, it should be as an event premium or an event gift. It has a 1,475 horsepower engine. It actually has a German engine in it, the Daimler-Benz DB605A1. It had three 20mm MG151s, one in the center, two in the wings, and then two 12.7mm Bredders. Of course, it has a slim, agile look to it. It's a very, very thin fuselage, all metal, semi-monocoque fuselage with a steel skeleton and a duralumin structure. Unfortunately, because of the way that Italy was going through the war, this didn't really ever reach production standards. Or if it did, it was never going to be produced in the numbers that were required. But it was seen at the time to be one of the best fighters around, and therefore I would love to see it in War Thunder in some capacity. The next one, not probably seen as one of the better ones. This is the RO57, and it's one of these, like, I suppose you call them like attacker, interceptor, heavy fighter ideas. It had access to the Fiat A74 radials and two 12.7mm Bredders. So that doesn't sound cool at all, does it? Well, introduce its brother. Its brother was the kind of ground attacker version, which I think would be much better for the game. It had two 12.7mm Bredders once again, but it was coupled with two 20mm MG151s and 1,100 pounds of bombs. The problem is they only made one of these. It would be a real true prototype in the game, but I would be fine with that since we do have testing data on it. The next one is the ELC series of vehicles for France, and the reason why I'm saying we should have one of these for the Operation Summer event is because they made many of them. You have the ELC Even 30, which is where they stuck two 30mm in a turret very similar to the one that you see before you. Then you have the Even 90, which is the one pictured with the 90mm gun. Then you have the Even 120, which is where it had 4 recoilless rifles on it. And then you have the Nord Aviation version, the ELC Even Nord Aviation, where it had access to 3 Nord missiles in an ATGM form. These vehicles were all 6 to 7 tons, 80 kilometers an hour, and the idea of them when they were conceived was a lightly armored but heavily armed machine which could be used and airlifted while supporting ground troops in a rapid deployment fashion. So if they had to invade somewhere, very quickly, or if they had to get these to the battlefield quickly, they were able to do it. Unfortunately, the project itself fell through, but we do have some really interesting vehicles which could fit great in War Thunder because of their weird and wonderful nature, and obviously their scouting tendencies. They also had a 2-man crew, so they would be quite easy to kill, and also not a lot of armor, so artillery beware. The next one is the Kar-Chi, the massive bigger brother of the Kar-Me that we already have in game. This one was actually based on the Chi-He, which we also have in game, has access to a 47mm, and it was an amphibious vehicle when you added the separate parts to it. You can see the separate parts being this part back here, this here, and obviously this. Now, what I would love to see, since we have the Kar-Me in game, but it's not amphibious because it doesn't have its extra parts, why not add a vehicle which is amphibious, which does have its extra parts, so it can kind of float around? Would it be useful? No, not really, but it would be a cool and interesting idea on top of the other amphibious vehicles we have. So yeah, let's throw in the Kar-Chi, have a bit of fun for the Japanese. The next one is the Westland Welkin. This is a high-altitude twin-engine fighter from the British. And when I mean high altitude, I mean stratosphere, so incredibly high altitude. What happened was mid-war, there was a modified Ju-88P, which was flying reconnaissance missions at the extreme height, so it was taking pictures very, very high. The British saw these vehicles and thought that the Germans were producing some very high-altitude bombers. So, in order to intercept these incredibly high-altitude bombers, they had to come up with a design to be able to counter them. Well, welcome to the Westland Welkin. The issue was the high-altitude bombers that they were trying to go after, or creating this machine for, never existed. So therefore, the primary use for this being made was just never realized. So even though it's basically not a larger version, it's not a larger version of the Hornets, but it's very similar in scope and idea. Unfortunately, just the plan just fell through. The main reason for it existing never really came, even though a few were produced and actually used. The next vehicle is the Voulty XP-54, the Swiss Goose as it's known. Of course, it's another pusher aircraft, or a pusher engine aircraft, very similar to the one that we have in the French tree, the Narval, and also the one that we have in the American tree. Now, it has access to the Lycoming XH2470 liquid-cooled piston engine with 20 300 horsepower, and it also had access to 2 37mm and 2 50 calibers with a turbo supercharger and some more heavier armor added. Through the project, they decided it was going to be a high-altitude interceptor. That is why it was given the turbo supercharger and also the extra armor, so it could hunt down whatever it could find. If these projects ever really took off the ground in a big way, it would have been really cool to see. A very interesting aircraft, and as you can see, could obviously fly incredibly well. They just never really went with them, probably due to them being unconventional or not wanting to change general practices that much. The next one is the Weasel, and the reason why I'm saying the Weasel, because I would like to see a Weasel in the main tech tree of the Germans, but there are many different versions of the Weasel little car that you can see here. Once again, following the idea of the ELC, a very light vehicle which packs a hell of a lot of power. There were Weasels mounted with 25mm and also ones with tow ATGMs and hot ATGMs. So why not have a tow ATGM one as a gift, and then the hot ATGM one in the tree. That to me sounds really fun. They had access to the Audi 2.1 litre 5-cylinder inline turbo diesel engine with 70 kilometers an hour behind them, 3 to 5 tons, and they could carry 2 or 3 man crews, mainly 3-man crews if we're talking about operating the ATGM. The armor itself was only really designed to stop small arms fire, so nothing crazy on that front. The next one is just looking at a different version of the Weasel, which is an air-to-air version. Now, I don't want this to be the Operation Summer vehicle. I just thought if you didn't know about it, why not show you about it? How the Weasel was more of a platform to be designed to mount some stuff off. The last one on the list is something that we talked about yesterday, coupling a mechanic with a cool vehicle. Why not a Weasel 2, which is of course a slightly larger than the Weasel, with a 120mm mortar on the back of it. So I would like to see how mortars work in game, as long as they're not too accurate. It would be fun to see. So why not add a vehicle like this which could scout and also mortar areas as well, in the form of the Weasel 2. I would love to see this, but mainly the Weasel 1 in-game at some point. So those are the vehicles I would like to see in this Operation Summer event. You can see that there is a lot of them, and just seeing one of these would make my day, but we'll have to see what comes in the Operation Summer event. Whatever it is, we'll make sure that we're ready on the Tech Hub to be able to deal with the event and the challenges and the community, and keep spirits high and keep everybody running well. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, John Reinman, Leonard Rudnick, Martinez, Matati, Moxie, Nick Graham, Alobrilo, Super Cacti, Elove Goats, and Seductive Trashcan for supporting the channel.